Welcome to episode 13 of Tiger Heart Chats. It's so great to have you guys follow us on this fantastic journey that we started during the COVID-19 lockdown. I am so happy because I have got a really, really cool friend on today's podcast. She's someone that I've known for quite a long time now. She works within the technology space that I work in. She's an amazing ball of energy and a fantastic spirit within the space. And whenever I'm around her, I always feel really positive and really excited. So please welcome to the stage the wonderful Amelia Kallman.
Thank you so much, Sanj. That was a great introduction. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. It's so good to have you on the podcast. I know we've been trying to get you on since we started this, and I know you've been busy and I've been busy. We've been trying to kind of get our diaries matched together, but it's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you.
There's going to be a few people on here who are listening to this podcast who don't know much about you.
What?
Why don't you give us a background on who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Amelia Kallman, and I'm a futurist, and I am a speaker and an author as well. I'm originally from right outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia, but I've lived in the UK now for 10 years, and I'm officially a Brit. So I became a Brit last year, so that's kind of cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I don't come from a traditional technology background, so I grew up as a child actress and went to school for that. And then I moved to China and opened up the first burlesque and cabaret nightclub in Shanghai. Had a big success there, and then got thrown out of China, as you do, and ended up here in this country. And it took me a while to land on my feet. So I didn't have a visa for ages. And that's when I wrote my book, Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl. And then as soon as I got my visa and I could work, I needed a job, any job. I didn't really care. So I had a friend who was going to this technology conference, and it was an innovation summit, I think. And at the time, I don't even know if I really knew what innovation meant. I think I had to ask someone. And but I said, let me go. I'll host your booth for you. You know, I'll network, meet some people. Maybe somebody will give me a job. So I go and I'm hosting this booth, but there was a couple over from ours, and it had all this really cool technology. It had touchscreen tables and virtual books and some augmented reality and holograms, and I'd never seen anything like it. And basically, I just kept going over and asking lots of questions, like, how does this work? What's it used for? How much does it cost? All these kind of things. And then I started bringing my people over and saying, do you want to see something really cool? And explaining to them what had been explained to me. And finally, somebody said, do you work for us? And I said, no, but I should. And a week later, I was hired as a marketing assistant at a creative technology agency. And there I worked my way up to become their global head of innovation. I opened up technology labs in London and Dubai, and I went on to open one in Scotland. And basically, it was the timing of it that was really cool, because it was 2013, and that was just when like Google Glass debuted, Oculus Rift came out, it got kickstarted, and I was getting in on the ground, getting to work with these technologies and learn about them and teach other people about them. And that's essentially how I started my career. I just found I had a real kind of curiosity and enthusiasm for these new technologies. But then I went freelance in, I guess, 2017. And since then, I've been traveling around the world, talking about these technologies. And I kind of today specialize in not just the opportunities of these new technologies, but also the potential risks that we need to be aware of as kind of businesses, brands, and as a society in general. yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. What a whirlwind kind of introduction into this emerging technology jungle that we're working in at the moment. So that's where you've come from. You just briefly talked about how COVID-19 has affected your career and that you have seen that as an opportunity, and you're starting to work with tech companies and help them navigate through this new kind of COVID-19 era. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a really amazing time. I mean, for a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about for years, kind of all of a sudden is becoming, urgent overnight. So I've been doing lots of talks on things like safety and security technologies. Also, how technology is going to change from an experience point of view. And then something that I've been doing a lot of research on and has been really kind of interesting to study and learn about during this time is the future of things like social media and how technology is impacting the brain of different generations in different ways, and kind of what brands can do today to start to prepare for tomorrow. So wow. I've been doing a lot of consulting in that respect. And I mean, yeah, this kind of this we've been talking about being able to work from home and, and being able to be, digital natives and all these kind of things. And now all of a sudden, it's happened. And, I've also been thinking about for years this kind of like, as everybody had been talking about urbanization and stuff, I've been talking about deurbanization, like, not having to live in a city. And I think, just from talking to my friends and stuff, I have a lot of friends now who are saying, I don't need to live here anymore if I can work from home. And so these kind of trends are going to be really interesting. And I think we're going to have a long-term effect on how we do everything from work to shop, to how we interact, to how we communicate. Our education systems are completely affected. I mean, we're all affected. I think we all need to go into therapy after this,
Just touching on the stuff that you're doing at the moment, what are your clients' challenges at the moment?
Well, there's lots of them. I mean, I tend to do a lot of events and conferences. So before this crisis, before this pandemic, that's generally how I make my living. I do speaking as well as workshops and completely programming entire conferences and hosting conferences and that kind of thing. So moving that kind of stuff into a digital virtual realm has been interesting. So really early on, I was doing a lot of work with Unilever, and I hosted their global leadership conference completely online. So usually this is like a 4-day conference where they do it in person at some swanky hotel or something. And so how to translate that and still be able to get the same results in a virtual setting is different and difficult. There has a lot of challenges to it. And I felt really fortunate that I had that experience it was just at the beginning of April. So we were just kicking off this whole kind of unique time period. And there were a lot of lessons I learned from it. I did a completely bespoke kind of special edition big reveal about some of the lessons that I learned from that. And now, I'm moving into looking at 2021, and how we plan a conference for next year and what that looks like and how this has just completely changed the game, really. So there's those challenges. And then how do we get back to going out safely again? And how technologies can serve us. And then for me, on my own personal kind of rampage, I like to remind people that, technology is great and it serves a lot of purposes, but we can't just blindly sign up for these things and give lots of our rights away when it comes to things like privacy and security, because I honestly think that, these are going to become the human rights issues of tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the era we're starting to go into now. Is last 20 years, we've all bought into this digital revolution. The last 10 years, everyone's kind of bought into this social media aspect of our lives. And now what we've kind of bought into has created these problems, particularly highlighted with what's going on at the moment with regards to the political climate, etc. Mm-hmm. And I find it really interesting. There was some research that came out over the last 2 years about how Generation Z aren't buying into this new digital era the same way that millennials and the generations before them have. I think it's something like 20% of Generation Zs refuse to sign up to any social media, which is quite interesting. I mean, it's not a huge percentage, but it is a sizable percentage.
Yeah, it's something that surprised me too in my research, this kind of, because I always assumed it was kind of older people who maybe were a bit more protective over their data and that kind of thing. But actually now we're finding that this is more of a trend amongst young people. And in general, right now, there's stats showing that social media use is at an all-time low, which I found really interesting. But I also think the way we're using it is changing. So whereas before it was really cool to flex on the gram and this is the holiday I'm on, these are my fabulous friends, look at my cute outfit, that whole kind of culture, suddenly that's not cool. That's not cool anymore. What is cool is being passionate about things like Black Lives Matter, engaging in social movements and being able to show kind of where your values really lie. And this is a huge change. And I think it comes down to the kind of the core of the difference between these generations. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it changes. I mean, from a personal perspective, I know that my engagement with social media has absolutely changed and kind of dwindled to this point where I use it for business sometimes. But now when I want to connect with friends, and I think, this is also as a result of COVID, I very much want to, call them or have a socially distanced, conversation in the park or, the human connection becomes so much more valuable. And you kind of this fakeness that is social media, that is influencers, etc., really becomes apparent.
It does feel like the notion of social media has flipped. There's always been a kind of nasty aspect to it, like with any platform, whether it's print media or whatever, but it's literally just flipped. It just feels like it's a completely different entity. Whether you value it or not, or if you're somewhere in the middle, it's not the same platform it was 15 years ago when it became part of human culture.
Well, in this whole thing around cancel culture, there was just a big letter signed by all kinds of famous people and stuff. This idea that, that Twitter, that trolls on Twitter can bring down an entire brand, an entire business, an entire, identity, somebody's, something that somebody has been working towards forever. And it's not even necessarily, it's not innocent till proven guilty. It's somebody saying something and it becomes very black and white. And that's really dangerous. It's really dangerous to a society where people, become afraid to express their point of view, become afraid to challenge opinions, to challenge, what's happening. It just, I think that's really dangerous. And it's nice to see that people are taking a bit of a stand and saying we have to, if we stand for freedom of speech, we have to get behind that and make sure that we don't destroy people. I don't know. That meanness to it has become just such an ingrained part of it that it's a shame, because that's not how I think any of the founders intended it to be.
Absolutely. I do find that you can focus on the nasty aspects of it. There are like beautiful aspects of it, you know, whether you're
absolutely
a creator or you make cookies in your kitchen and you want to show that to the world, or you've seen a beautiful sunset or a flower, or you're just having a good time with some friends. I've actually had a bit of a thing happen to me. So about a month ago, all of my social media accounts were hacked.
Oh no.
Which was kind of at the time really upsetting. But since I've managed to pull myself out of it and rebuild my social media presence, I've actually found it quite therapeutic. And what I have learned is that a lot of the information that I got before I was hacked, there was a lot of negativity being bombarded to me. And now, because I'm starting from scratch, it kind of allows me to be a bit more careful about what I look at, but also what I share as well.
Yes, absolutely. Like being able, I think we take it for granted, you know, how much we absorb as humans and as in our brains. You know, I'm constantly like deleting I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram. I'll delete it and try and forget about it. But then like then I'll feel like posting something and go back on, and then I'm scrolling, and you just don't even realize it, you know, like, yeah, and this stuff gets absorbed within the conscious, within the subconscious. And I think that's a really good point about, you know, being able to curate the positive. And I personally see that there's a bit of a gap in the market for disruption of these social media platforms, you know. Like there's some apps that I think are starting to get it right. But at the same time, you know, do I want to be supporting Facebook every day? You know, not really, to be honest. You know, I think that there's a monopoly going on right now. I do. I think that there's, you know, they're buying up all the startups that could potentially, you know, become something in the future that might challenge them. And I don't think that that's a very good thing at the moment. But again, that needs to come down from legislation. That needs to come down from the government. And I think they're starting to address that.
They are, yeah. I saw there was a big governmental investigation into the 4 big players within that space: Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple. And I think The Verge did a really good article about it and did a short 8-minute video edit of what was going on. And it was just really interesting. What it highlighted was that these digital powers have such a large grasp on human behavior and human identity. And the sharing of that data is just not being policed in a way that's fair. Whether that changes or not depends on how the world changes. But right now, there is a problem and it's being addressed.
Well, and then also from an individual perspective, it's how we participate and how we choose to participate and having that choice, you know, without with also realizing that it does hijack your brain and it does rewire the brain. You know, and release chemicals in the brain that make you feel good, that make you feel bad, all these kind of things. You know, and I think that understanding that you also have a personal choice in this is important for people to realize too. I mean, as a general kind of bigger trend, I'm finding that as people, you know, as the world continues to be a place where we have less control over some big things, you know, like the pandemic, politics, all these kind of things where people feel a bit helpless, they look for things that they can actually have an impact on and make a change for. So for instance, like veganism has grown 400% in the last 3 years. That's because that is something that I can do as an individual to make a difference in the future, and I can control that and feel good about myself for doing that. And I'm kind of seeing that, you know, as a trend towards in social media, like how you use social media. You know, like a lot of the Gen Zers who I'm friends with and stuff, right now it's all about promoting causes and protests and, charities that you can donate to and drawing light to the areas that really need to have some light right now, and being able to use it for good and for the whole, not just kind of to promote the individual.
Absolutely. I think we're definitely in interesting times with regards to where social media is at the moment. I mean, we always have been, but it's just now is the kind of prime moment for it to kind of break off into something else, whether it's a public service or whether it's being used in certain ways to help us as humans or not, And
also, I mean, how do you meet people now? Like it becomes so much more difficult. I was having this talk with some of my single friends the other day, and they were saying like, yeah, but when was the last time a guy came up to you in the bar? Like, it's not like that happens all the time anyways. But because of social restrictions and things, it becomes even that much more difficult to have those kind of connections. And it's funny, like we were talking about, post-COVID, will there be lots of people like having affairs and things because it becomes so much more intimate to have, to be physically close to someone, to have some kind of, to feel, everybody's so hungry for connection. Will that just like, tumble into into something out of control? I don't know.
into massive infidelity. That's crazy. Just us highlighting that's really interesting. It's actually been quite therapeutic for me because I've been waiting to talk to someone about this for a while, so it's great that you're here. I just wanted to talk to you about the XR Summit. So this is a summit that you've curated and produced yourself in partnership with ISE. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell everyone about it because it's a fantastic thing.
Okay, so I've been doing it the last 2 years. It's the XR Summit as part of ISE. It's been in Amsterdam the last 2 years. And basically, it's an opportunity to get people in the XR industry, especially around the people who integrate these technologies into businesses and do campaigns and who are active with this technology and innovating within this space. And we get together and we talk about the latest trends, latest technologies, and also the challenges. So while there's definitely kind of like an integrator innovation focus on it, there's also that opportunity to talk to each other about, the ethics around these technologies and also how we can support each other as an industry, which is something that I don't think we do enough of in this particular space. So this year it's going to be in Barcelona. Well, this year, so February 2021, hopefully, fingers crossed, Barcelona. And it's also going to be online, and it's also going to be in the Metaverse. So this is something that I've just like said, oh yeah, like wouldn't that be cool? I'm gonna do it, and I know that several months from now I'm gonna be like ripping my hair out, like why did I say I would do this? But we have to put our money where our mouth is. Like it's time to start doing these things and experiencing these conferences in this hybrid way. So, I mean, I've been to a couple things in the metaverse. And when I say that, I mean, in virtual reality, in this infinite white space, there's a lot of great platforms out there for collaboration in this space. Also for like meetups and hangouts, what was it? The Shangri-La at Glastonbury just did like a rave. And they had 4 million people come, and people said it was even better than the real thing. I mean, I thought it was really interesting in Fortnite. Travis Scott, in the midst of this pandemic, when we can't physically get together, he did a 15-minute concert in Fortnite, and there were 12.8 million people. You know, like. That's so incredible. Like that's the biggest gathering, and I'm using air quotes when I'm saying that, in human history. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but in modern history. So there's so many opportunities like to work with XR and to see where it's going. And now, people who maybe had thought it was like a gimmick or maybe had thought, oh, it's not for my business or brand, are now starting to see the value in how we can use it as a design tool, as a collaboration tool across geographic locations.
Yeah.
And then from a training perspective, the integration of this with training and education, I think is going to become huge because it engages the brain in a different way that is that allows people to learn faster and to pick things up. And then you start to include other technologies in that, things like haptics and stuff. And your brain is transfixed in a way that it's not when you have a screen in front of you and you're worried about volume and trying to see what's going on in somebody's hands from.
I'm always baffled when people don't see the value in these types of technology because you're adding more choice to someone that's engaging with the experience. I'll tell you one thing that's happened in our business, particularly in Tiger Heart, we're doing so many more things now via the web, whether it's a virtual conference or a VR production or whatever it is. We're doing so many more of those things now because of what COVID has made us to have to become, if that makes sense. And it's great that you're applying this metaverse methodology to the XR Summit because XR is about adding value to a consumer. It doesn't have to take over. I think that's the problem. The mindset is, oh, this is never going to take over. It's not about whether it takes over or not. It's about what can you give your customer that's extra or an addition to what you currently do. You touched on it with regards to the Travis Scott concert in Fortnite. 12 million people tuned into that. I know businesses that would chop their right arm to have the access to 12 million people when everyone's at home, whether it's a television show or whatever, or a live stream. It's an opportunity to do exciting things, to inspire your audience.
Absolutely. Well, and what was really interesting last year too with the XR Summit is, for me, my kind of specialty and background has always been in like virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, but also to learn more about like immersive XR, like how to apply augmented reality and, 360 soundscapes and 360 like visionscapes to make it more inclusive. So we're not tied to a headset. So people are going into these spaces and we can still do that, as we start to get back out into the world and really use this opportunity of having to be spaced out, of not having to crowd everybody in, like sardines, to be able to make really impactful experiences that we haven't before. And I also think, things like web AR, which I've been talking about for years, now when we go shopping and stuff, this really starts to play a part. And one of my favorite technologies, and again, this goes back, so Scape IO, they allow us to kind of like Geo Tag areas with augmented reality. So, I'm walking down the street, instead of there being a sign in front of your office building, there's like an animated augmented reality game that I can engage with that lets me know like this is Tiger Heart, like this is where you are. Or, you go to a historical a venue or site and you can see like the pictures of your friends who have been there, or what it used to look like or what it's going to look like after construction and all these things, and just being able to add this whole new dimension to the world, one that we are, we're already looking down at our phones all the time. And that being said, I personally am looking forward to Apple AR glasses when they come out, because just returning to a heads up, hands-free, eyes open experience, I think is going to change us again as a humanity, hopefully. But I talk about that startup and they've just been bought by Facebook for 40 million, so there again, that's a UK grown, startup innovation that gets bought out by one of these big companies. And I don't blame them for a minute. I mean, 40 million, bring it on. But, but again, that just shows, like that's where they have the monopoly over everything,
Whether you like them or not, the fact that they're investing in the future is exciting.
Yeah, sure.
I'm really excited about the next XR Summit because the one I went to before was so much fun. And I love our ISC to bits.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere there is going in one direction. And what I really liked about your XR Summit was that it had a different type of atmosphere that was kind of quite refreshing.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I mean, I come from a nightclub background, you know, and a burlesque background and cabaret and things. So my attention span is as short as anyone's, you know, so I need it to be exciting. I need it to be engaging. And I also need, you know, great speakers and great panelists. So what I'm looking for now, and if anybody's listening who would be right for this, it's really important to me. I've been working at this for years to have, you know, gender equality in the speakers and the panelists, to be able to represent you know, a range of minorities. You know, I think that's really exciting about the XR industry is because it is so diverse. It really is. You know, I mean, considering that this is something that was started in the 60s, you know, how far it's come, and then to meet teenagers who are developing in this space who, you know, they're light years ahead of, you know, me or, you know, some other people. So, I mean, really, I think that's such an advantage that this industry has. And I really want to highlight that. And then also looking for partners who can host events inside virtual reality, who already have kind of the platform in place and who'd be willing to do that. Cause yeah, I mean, we get to kind of expand what we can talk about, you know, and then some of these conferences that I've been to, you know, on Zoom and Teams and that kind of stuff lately, you know, there is no networking. I'm sorry. You know, like there just is no networking. And for me, I think this is something that virtual reality can really play a cool part in, you know, and so I'm really curious to see how that unfolds. It might not be there yet, but I think it's getting there.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and then also demos. So I think I'm going to do kind of like a startup lightning round where some startups in this space have, you know, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes or whatever to get their product seen and get it out there. They'll probably be pre-recorded. So, because I mean, that's to me, that's, you know, like with CES, I go every year, and this year it's going to be virtual again. And that kind of being able to walk around a conference and find something that truly delights you, that, you know, knocks you over. There was one this last year where they were able to bring temperature into the virtual space. So I could actually feel like a fireball explode over my body, or,
Wow.
you know, get into a snowball fight and feel that kind of that frigidness when ice hits you in the face. I mean, incredible. Blew me away. And it was just a startup in Eureka Park. And it was my favorite thing that I saw that whole time.
You touched on it briefly just now about you being a showgirl in China. Talk to us about Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so that's my book, Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl. It's available on Amazon internationally and on Kindle. It's won 2 awards now for Best Memoir and Best Autobiography.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's my story. Basically, when I was 23, my partner and I moved to China to open up the first burlesque and cabaret nightclub in Shanghai, and it was a real return to the 1930s classic cabaret. We had a Buddhist temple that we transformed into this gorgeous venue, and for a couple of years there, man, it was just it was like a movie. It was the coolest thing. Wow. And it's yeah, so I directed the shows. I was also one of the stars of the shows. I had 6 showgirls, the Chinatown Dolls. I had 4 showmen, and we performed a different show every night. So Wednesdays and Thursdays were all in Chinese. Fridays and Saturdays were in English. And yeah, it was, gosh, I mean, it's reminisce about it, you know. It's probably one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. I mean, pulling off the club, and a lot of the book is about the challenges of doing business in China, and as a foreigner, and pulling it off, and all the kind of red tape and bureaucracy and everything, as well as the drama that you get from, owning a nightclub and working with showgirls and, and all that kind of personal drama.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did you get into that? What led you to China to do that?
Okay, so I grew up as a child actress, doing TV and commercials and stuff in Virginia and DC and New York, and I traveled for it. But and then I went to college for it, and then I met the man who is now my husband, and he was a nightclub designer in New York. He designed a lot of the famous nightclubs,
right?
And he had moved to Belize and had an island in Belize and ran a resort there. And then when he came back to New York in the 90s, living in the penthouse of the Chelsea Hotel, which is where I met him, he started getting into doing like old vaudeville theaters up, renovating them to be burlesque clubs and getting into old showbiz. So we call it pre-television, so it was kind of a reaction, I think, to like the rave culture that was also really big at that time. And then when I met him, I had just gotten finished studying Shakespeare at Oxford, and I was kind of a snob. I didn't know what burlesque meant. I was like, what is it? Is it just like a fancy name for stripping? And like, but then I got to see some of these acts and these performers, and I was really privileged because I got to work with a lot of the trailblazers who established it as its own art form in the nouveau burlesque movement in New York. And it blew me away. And, it's very attractive, as an actress, as somebody who, went through years of being rejected for TV shows and blah, blah, blah. I lost out 3 parts to Michelle Williams, who now like has an Oscar. To be able to have full creative control over what you put out and the message you put out, and how you present yourself. I mean, there's nothing sleazy about it, really, when it comes down to it. I mean, that said, there is bad burlesque, like, don't get me wrong. But the stuff that we did, it was very much, it had a narrative. It was funny. It was charming. It was sexy. It had all these different layers to it. And it was very powerful. It was very cool. And then what we did that was really different from what other people do in this area is we would get, 6 girls singing and dancing in costumes on stage. And, in some acts you would be the star of the show, and some you would be the like the spear carrier, and just the being able to be creative every single day. And I try and still be creative in other ways in my life now.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of us within the emerging technology space have creativity at the core. That's what I found anyway. I meet a lot of people like us who started from music or film or acting and just kind of accidentally fell into this wonderful space that's just constantly changing. So I think it's always good to have a creative background when you apply yourself to this space.
Yeah, I mean, that's what technology is. It's creativity. I mean, there's, so it does really lend itself to it. And then I also got to do the first burlesque show in 360 video.
Wow.
Back in 2015, if you can believe it. So the technology was still so new, and what we did was so cutting edge that, even by the time it was kind of like edited and came out, the technology had already kind of moved on again. So I'm always looking for ways that we can kind of merge those two worlds. But yeah, so during lockdown, I've been working on my next book, which is a novel. It's trying my hand at fiction.
Wow.
Which, when I decided I was going to do it, it sounded a lot easier than I think it is. But, at the same time, it's amazing because I basically like have created this alternative universe that I can escape into with these characters and stuff. And it's loosely based on my time at the Chelsea Hotel, but it's definitely fiction in that it includes all the famous women and the famous stories that happened there.
Amazing.
So yeah, I've just written the first draft. So hopefully look out for that.
Are you allowed to disclose what it's called?
It will be called The Last Chelsea Girl.
The Last Chelsea Girl. Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Just going back to your time in China, why did you leave?
Well, you got to read the book, mate.
Okay. All right. So if you want to know why she left, you need to read the book, guys. Whoever's listening.
Yeah. It was a big escalation. It, and very dramatic. And, I mean, I'm not afraid to say, like, we lost everything. Like, we had to escape the country in 36 hours, or else I would just be getting out of prison today. So.
Oh my God. Okay. Those of you out there who want to know what happened, please get your hands on the book. It's on Amazon.
Yeah.
And also on Kindle. Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's shift back into the tech space. You have a brand called The Big Reveal. Mm-hmm. Tell everyone about that.
Okay, so The Big Reveal is my monthly innovation newsletter, and it's an opportunity to highlight the latest cool new tech that I have learned about over that last month that I think would be useful and helpful for other people to know about. So there's no profit involved. It's a free service that I offer. The idea is I think I have some value to add to people's business and lives by doing this as a service. And because it's something that I'm excited about and curious about, and kind of have the background to be able to parse things like why this is important and why this is a game changer, and then be able to highlight that in something that's short and digestible and accessible. I think, one of my talents, because I don't come from a technical background, is being able to take something complex and make it accessible to people, because I really believe that technology is for the people. It's to improve our lives. It's here for us, and there's no point trying to complicate it or talk about it in a language that people don't understand, that's exclusive to people. So really being able to try and share that. So I do. It's on YouTube. My name, Amelia Kallman, and then I also do a digital newsletter that people can subscribe to. And I really enjoy it. I have a nice mailing list too. And, it started out as something I used to do in an agency I used to work for. I used to send them out on Fridays, and I would say, how to look sexy at a dinner party this weekend. Here's like 5 things that like you should know that you can talk about that people will be like, whoa, that's awesome. So that's how it started out. And now it's kind of evolved into something a bit more formal. But hopefully people still enjoy it, and I get a lot of good feedback. So
I watch the big reveals and I really enjoy them. I think they're fantastic, not just because there's new technology in there, but it's just how you talk about that technology to the people. And I think that's a really important thing that you mentioned before, is you're taking complex things and making them approachable, which is what Steve Jobs did with Apple. He basically made technology simple to think about. So you didn't have to worry about what CPU was in there or what data XYZ or whatever. You just picked something up and it worked and it benefited you. And I do believe that there is a problem in the tech space where people sometimes just focus on the tech aspect of it and not really think about how it's going to add value to people's lives.
Yeah, well, and also, I do a lot of work with kids in high schools and mentoring and things, and just kind of drawing attention to how many different areas you can work in within technology without necessarily having to know how to code. I mean, I wish I knew how to code, but also I don't know if my personality would let me do that. There's being able to, there's so many different ways to be in this industry and lots that people can bring to it,
Well, I think we're in an era of collaboration. That's the key. If you don't know how to code, then find someone who does know how to code and collaborate with them to build your vision. We're kind of coming towards the end of the podcast. I just wanted to focus on you, particularly with regards to where you are now, where you've come from, and also just where you're going into with regards to your future as a futurist. What's on the horizon for you apart from your book?
Well, the most important thing to me at the moment is really establishing where I can add the most value around educating people around these new technologies and the potential impacts. So at the moment, this tends to have a lot to do around potential risks and understanding the ways that technology could maybe perhaps negatively influence the future so that we can avoid them. I mean, I think about things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and everybody's like, oh, never saw that coming. And it's like, well, we should have. And for me, I think that at the end of the day, that's what really drives me is I want to produce work and produce research and guidance and consultation that is going to help prevent catastrophes and to help protect people and human rights. So, I think that's really changed for me since I started in this industry, and even just since I went freelance in about 2017, because there has been, as a creative person, there's been, dark nights of the soul where I'm like, what am I doing? I work in technology. Like, is this the devil? And it's really not, but it is how you approach it. And it is also around education. So, I mean, I love the work I'm doing with like Gen Z and hopefully in the future with Gen Alpha. And as much as I do working, with these big brands and being able to talk to them about how we strategize for the future and how we can make a real impact. And it's exciting, there's so much wrong right now that being able to find these kind of like pockets of joy, these pockets of excitement, these things that can turn you on, that becomes so much more valuable. And then being able to share that and communicate that with other people, this is what we have to do, which is why I love doing things like this podcast and talking to you and working with you. Because I know you get that kind of bigger picture around
Absolutely.
Why we do this.
And I agree with you. Life's too short to just kind of wallow in misery. Just look for that goodness and capture it and walk towards it. So everything that you're doing right now is exciting. You're disrupting a world that needs disrupting. You're challenging perspectives, you're engaging with lots of people, and you're becoming a captain of industry, which is amazing. I'm sure there's lots of people that are watching you who are being inspired by what you do. What advice would you give someone that's just starting within the tech space that wants to navigate freely without having to feel controlled?
That's a really good question. I think looking for mentors and positive influences, looking at people who've done it before you, connecting. I think that is always really important. But then there's also that just like follow your gut and like make it happen. Like, there's no shame in failing. Anybody who is anyone who has succeeded ever has failed a number of times. And, putting yourself out there, not being afraid of it. And as I say this, I have to say it to myself too, because it goes back to that kind of what we were talking about before about trolling culture and things. And every time I put up like a YouTube video, it does cross my mind, and kind of just being able to say like, no, I'm not afraid of that. Like, F you, like, I'm here, I am meant to take up this space. I have something valid to say. And also just being open to learn, we're all here to learn from each other. Nobody has all the answers. And we are stronger together. So, but don't be afraid to be yourself and put yourself out there, because there, as many trolls as there are that many more, if not more, people who support you and are happy to see you do your thing, because nobody else can do it. Only you can.
Exactly. Amazing. I'm sure there's going to be loads of people here who want to get in contact with you after listening to this. What's the best way for them to get in contact?
The best way is probably my website, which is my name, ameliakallman.com. That has links to, that has my email, which is also amelia.kallman@gmail.com. And my Twitter, I have multiple Twitter accounts. And but that's how you can get in touch with the big reveal if you're interested in that. And that also has links to my book. It has links to my artwork. That's kind of my hub.
Awesome. And you just touched on your artwork, but we're coming to the end of this podcast, so we're going to have to save you for another episode. It's been really, really awesome having you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone listening is going to get loads of value out of this. Those of you listening, I hope you enjoyed this. Please do share and subscribe using the hashtag TigerHeartChats, all one word. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please be good.